Welcome to the ROpocalypse Now broadcast thing that I do on the web. This is sort of my own little way of reaching out to people and showing everybody how hermetics works. It's a series of broadcasts that are designed to talk about hermetics and the things that I think are cool, and basically the things I think are cool. And today we have a special guest, Jason Miller, who will be joining us. He is the author of many books and a good friend of mine, a fellow gentleman from Jupiter, who recently published Sex, Sorcery, and Spirit, which is a handbook to the erotic, magical approaches to the kind of things that we do. We may or may not talk too much about that, but basically this is our opportunity to go over some of the cool things that we like to do with magic. So, Jason, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Rufus.
My pleasure. So,
I'm proud to be a part of the ROpocalypse.
Yeah, me too. You know, I don't even know what that means yet.
Just for clarification, is it the ROpocalypse or is it the ROpocalypse?
Ooh, I have been calling it the ROpocalypse, but it could be the ROpocalypse. I don't really care. And what does it mean? You know, what's an apocalypse? It's just a revelation. So this is just revelations, man.
There you
go. So the sex, sorcery, and spirit thing. Let's start there and see where we end up. So you recently published your book. What inspired this particular book?
Well, you know, right from the beginning of my serious training, I should say, you know, sex has been on the radar. Sex magic has been part of the radar. After I got done with sort of the intro, this is how you cast a spell kind of stuff, I in high school I delved into modern magic, which has, of course, a chapter on sex magic. So, you know, I actually had a halfway decent teaching on sex magic before I ever had sex for the first time. So I got to practice it right out of the gate. Right. And then just a couple of years later, when I met the man that was going to be my sort of central mentor, John Mearden Reynolds, also known as Lama Vajranatha, he, of course, stresses sex as a fundamental part of Tantra and magic. In fact, you know, he has this long nakba hair sort of matted on top of his head. And when I asked him about it, he had said, well, you know, monks shave their head to show that they're celibate. He's like, you know, sorcerers like me, we wear our hair long to show that we're not celibate. So
it's always sexy.
It's always been on the radar, and I spent some time in the OTO, as you know, and also what was then the Chthonic Iranian OTO as well. And so sex magic has always been, you know, a pretty important part of my studies and practice. But it's something that I feel hasn't been served well recently. So I wanted to write a book, because when I write something, I try to write about things that I think are not being covered well or that are missing key components. Mm-hmm. So that's really the fundamental why I wrote this book.
So I remember when you were first starting this particular book, you had talked about you were going to write a book on love magic. And then the next book that came out was this Sex, Sorcery, and Spirit book, and I was just kind of curious, is this the love magic book, or is it the love magic book still to come?
No, the love magic book is still to come. The love magic book will probably be a chapbook, sort of like Advanced Planetary Magic, sort of a you know, a 10,000 word electronically distributed thing with maybe audio files and stuff like that attached. because that's a subject, while I think, I have a particular spin on it, and I'd like to say some things about what is maybe traditional but still not a very good idea, and I have some things to say about it. I don't feel like it, to quote Gordon White, I don't feel like it's book shaped. I feel like what I have to say about love magic is chapbook shaped. And, I try to stay away from just throwing out loads of spells, especially ones that have already been thrown out 100 times. So, it's a chapbook. Coming possibly at the end of 2015, beginning of 2016.
February would be a good time.
I'm serious now. I'm planning these things out like Marvel plans movies, and just
right.
Releasing schedules years ahead of time.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of so. Your success over the last year and a half has just been off the charts. I mean, you've gone from part-time sorcerer, full-time writer, full-time day job having guy to full-time sorcerer and supporting yourself and your family and everything in just an amazing way. I guess it's been about, what, 2 years now, or?
About a year and a half since there has been no day job.
Right, okay. So, I mean, that was just, because we get to talk and stuff, and we've been able to keep in touch about that kind of thing, I think it's just a super perfect example of what it is that we've kind of delved into in the whole G4J thing, but not just that, also the practical application of magic that we do. I focus on hermetics. You've got a complete blend of everything from hoodoo to Tibetan tantra, and I mean, across the entire board, ceremonial magic. Your chants are amazing. Having gotten to see you do rituals in public, you incorporate so many different things into your practice, like Deb and I were talking about in that other interview, where she brought up the you just select techniques and put it into practice. But yeah, I mean, your success is, to quote your favorite guy, success be thy proof. You can't really you can't really deny that the things that you're doing are really effective, and you've just really blossomed, and that's kind of why I wanted to do an interview with you, and why one of the things I'd planned on doing with you was just, I mean, how did you start going from that spiritual, meditative, ascension-based practice that so much of like modern magic and the OTO stuff and all those different traditions teach, and move more into the kind of practical sorcery that that transforms your life so effectively? How did you go from one to the other?
I started out with both right off the bat. My very earliest, I had some psychic experiences and such, and then I was 15 when I made contact with a teacher in high school who was a Rosicrucian, and she introduced me to tarot and to some mostly energy-based protection practices like shielding, and she turned me on to modern magic and things like that. But at the same time, I was also hanging out in this town that was near where I grew up, a town called Lakewood, New Jersey, where there was an old-school conjure shop there. In fact, it wasn't even... you couldn't tell it was a shop right at the front. It was called the Globe, African Fashions, and it was just that in the window. You would have African American hair care products and clothing and stuff like that. And of course, in the 80s, this was all, very, very separated from what white people were wearing. And, if you remember the big Africa pendants and stuff like that, those cool leather ones and stuff like
Uh-huh.
that. So it was like stuff like that in the window, and wigs, leaves, and things like that. So I, of course, a young white punk kind of kid is like, oh, let me go in there. Um, but I did. I just walked in, and then when you walk in, the front looks exactly like what the window looks like. And then I just kind of like spotted in the back that there was this opening between the shelving units. And I kind of walked back there, and I saw more people shopping back there, and I turned around, and bam, there it is. There's herbs and powders and books, old DeLawrence copies of the Key of Solomon and stuff like that. The sixth and seventh books of Moses, and just all this great stuff. So on the one hand, I'm going through learning the LBRP and the BRH and to evoke goetic spirits on the one hand, but then I also have this sorcery practice that's being fed by hoodoo and also by mastering witchcraft, which
Mhm.
I think I might have stolen it from the library, or checked it out and never returned it. And,
These things
so
happen.
Paul Hewson was a big influence upon me, and he really showed how the two can be brought together. I mean, mastering witchcraft has sort of a really simplified style of goetic work that relies upon the deacons as the authority rather than God, thus making it sort of more applicable for pagans. And so that really appealed to me, and I worked with a lot of the spells in there, and so really right from the start, it's always been this desire for spiritual progress, for clarity, enlightenment, and worldly success. And to me, it always has seemed like one should reflect the other, unless you're a monk or a nun, or a homeless wandering kind of, you know, came from kung fu. If you're not on one of those anti-materialist trips, like on a serious anti-materialist trip, then one should reflect the other. You should have this spiritual light shining that reflects through you out into the world and affects change. Otherwise, what good are you?
Right. Okay. So you never really, you never didn't. I mean, you never had to switch from one to the other. You've had this integrated practice. Maybe it's just the things that jumped out at me in Sorcerer's Secrets, and even before that, the the magical defense book that you wrote, whose name escapes me at the moment. It's the practical stuff which which you're always writing that's always so useful, and so I just kind of assumed that there was more of a practical focus to your work, but you bring up the concept of enlightenment, and I'm super keen to have a conversation about what that means to you. So what does enlightenment mean, sir?
Enlightenment to me means um, resting in natural clarity without uh, without distraction, without getting caught up in the cause and effect that goes around us. This is not to say to disengage from the cause and effect that goes around us, but to be fully who we are and be able to exist in the world without that being sullied. That would be enlightenment. I should say that, to steal a quote from Dawkins and kind of misapply it and twist it around a little bit. I always personally, I like to say that full enlightenment or whatever the nature of God is or the meaning of life, not only do I not think that anyone knows it or has it right, I don't think we have the capacity at this stage in our development to know it or to get it right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that. And it's so easy to mistake people that are really just a few steps ahead as being at the final stage.
Yeah.
That I am always wary of people who claim to have the whole thing figured out. So at the moment, natural clarity. I'm a Dzogchen guy. In fact, the next book I do with New Page is going to be about Dzogchen and meditation. So that'll be a little bit of a break from the practical. And even this book is primarily about enlightenment. It's primarily about inner alchemy, changing who you are rather than tinkering around with the world around us. Although there's a little bit of that in there.
Okay, so what's the intent? What's the expectable outcome of going through the practices of this particular book that you've most recently written?
Well, if nothing else, you get laid.
And have a good time doing it. A new excuse to have sex.
The idea of the sex magic book is that Buddhahood or enlightenment or clarity or becoming an ipsissimus, which simply means one's very own self. It doesn't carry any of this, becoming something more than what you already are.
Right.
Ipsissimus is simply fully who they actually are. So, and I'm not claiming to be an ipsissimus or anything like that. I'm just pointing out the term. I think you're... What's that?
Who else are you?
I think you pretty much have to be a wanker to be an ipsissimus.
Well, I'm way ahead of you then.
I'm sorry. I just got a call that I think is from my kid's school. Can we hold on to this?
Sure.
Can you pause this for a minute?
Yeah.
Woo!
Okay, we're back. We had a little bit of interruption there, but we're carrying on.
My fault. Sorry.
It's all good. So, we were just talking about how your book is doing really well. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So where were we? We were talking about enlightenment and what it means and how the point of the sex magic that you teach in this latest book is to sort of get you closer to that more than, although there are some practical techniques.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the book is filled with practical techniques because spirituality should be something you do,
Right, I agree 100%.
But the idea here is that Buddhahood or your own divine nature or enlightenment or whatever you want to call it is not that far away.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than taking the tactic that we have to focus on routing out bad qualities and bolstering positive qualities and this kind of thing that would be typical of, say, Sutric Buddhism, my book takes the tantric perspective, which is that all of this is just one primordial experience away. That you can rather than cultivating and slowly getting there, you can just break on through to the other side with a very powerful, earth-shattering experience. And of course, the best one for this is the orgasm, because if you're doing it right, it should be a primordial experience. It is this moment, the petite mort, as it gets called in French, the little death. The ego falls away, and just you're left with this blistering clarity. And of course, there are ways then to sort of get in there and open that up. And this is what the book is about. So the book gives inner heat practices, which are sort of the missing component for most of the Western sex magic, and uses that to generate bliss in the moment of orgasm, and then sort of blow the doors off the whole thing and circulate the energy and flow into your partner and all that kind of stuff. And then there's, the directing that energy towards practical ends, if that's your game, or creating the elixir of life, or anointing oils, and even creation of artificial spirits and stuff like that. All that's in the book too, but primarily it's about the initiatic journey. It's about blowing the doors off.
Okay, so once you've got the doors blown off, and you're going back to your how did you put it? It's not that far away. It's not that far of a step down the way. How does your life really change once you've gone through all these metamorphoses and you've started to apply these techniques on a regular basis? And I mean, what does it look like in your life to be a fully aware person? What are you? What's the difference between Jason today and Jason? All right, maybe you don't consider yourself fully aware, but you've been through some processes that make you more aware than a lot of people, and Jason today versus Jason 20 years ago. How does that? What's the difference in how that actually manifests?
Well, the difference is that I have seen past the ordinary mind in glimpses. People talk about the non-dual state, and where you're beyond this cause and effect and beyond karma and all that, or in Western terms we might call it the abyss. And they talk about it in terms of crossing the abyss, then you're there. Then you are this kind of Magister Templi, or this great adept. But that's not really it. That's the beginning of the journey. That's like getting your black belt in karate. It's like, okay, congratulations, you've proven your basic training is done. It's about making that state that you reach temporarily into a stage that you're at. And that's really the work of a lifetime, if not more lifetimes. And I certainly don't live in that state. I get pissed off at traffic. I get, angry at my kids when I have to tell them something 96 times.
It's the 93rd time is the worst.
Right, but the difference is that when I remember, and this is that sort of Gurdjieffian focus on remembrance as being key to the spiritual path, when I remember, I can shift there. I can shift into that state. And then all of a sudden those things that have their claws in you let go. The best way to describe it is in Dzogchen terms. And I always tell people, I said, it's like your mind is a mirror. When most of us pass a mirror, the mirror is reflecting something, and we look in the mirror and we just see what is being reflected. So if the mirror is reflecting flowers, we take a look and say, oh, wonderful, beautiful image of flowers. My heart is soaring. I am happy. Life is, is wonderful. But if the mirror is reflecting a steaming pile of dog dookie, then we go, disgusting, that's horrible, just get that off. But the important thing to remember is that the image of flowers does not change the surface of the mirror. The image of dog dookie does not fundamentally change the nature of the mirror. All the things that happen to us do not really change our underlying nature. which is clarity, reflectiveness, spaciousness, and awareness. And if we can realize that, if we can get past this dualistic grasping, I know thinking in terms of transcendence is getting increasingly out of vogue lately. But if we can transcend that and rest in this nature of mind, then we really have something. So in terms of sexual alchemy, it's about sublimation, it's about heat, it's about becoming more subtle. And this affects not only the body but the mind. So you might achieve this state while meditating, you might achieve it during orgasm. The trick is, how do you make it real? Well, you make it real by each time you're experiencing it, letting it affect you in a deeper and deeper way, and sort of building it into building it into your body, into your energy body, into your mind,
into your choices.
In your choices in life, and it reflects all these things, and then you become what you're aiming at.
Right. Okay. So, all right. So, going back to your successes for the last year and a half, how much of your you've gone from you've turned your life around 180 degrees, in terms of the polarity of your major primary income source, and in terms of your general practical Maslow's pyramid. You went from having a hobby that was a great side income and a decent core job, to having a really great hobby that really blew the doors off of off of what you were doing in your core job, right? So, I mean, how much of the practice that you've done do you credit with your ability to go from I don't know, the relative safety of what the whole day job thing, and into something that might be a little bit more risky, but that you actually know from your experiences something you can influence a lot more than like a personal career? You know what I mean?
It helped. I would love to sit here and tell the story about how I bravely took the reins of my life and said, I am going to be the self-made man, and just cast care to the wind, and knew with certainty that my path would lead me to success. And, but that would all be a lie.
It would also be really stupid, right? I mean, frankly.
Essentially what happened is that, when I turned 30, and I'm 42 now, but around the time that I turned 30, I started to realize that, I spend a lot of my time on magic, and a lot of people are asking me to write and teach and do magic for them, and that in general I already knew that people paid a lot more attention and valued something more when they are paying for it.
Right.
I learned that lesson a long time ago. So even then I was already giving like odd classes at occult shops for money and things like that. And then New Page contacted me about writing a book for them, based on an article I did for Witchvox. And so, it kind of then started to be this nice side income, essentially magic paying for itself, because you know that it can be a big money suck when you want to buy all these, books from England that are, there are only 9 copies bound in unicorn scrotum put out by Zoenon.
I'm enjoying Pyramidos quite a bit myself.
Yeah. So, it can be a money hole. So I started to make the hobby pay for itself. And then it started to get bigger and become part of the ordinary bills. But what also happened at this time is that I moved further away from the city and more into a more rural area. And so when the dot bomb happened, I no longer wanted to get a job in telecom or computers. I was working for an internet telephone company, and I, I didn't want to travel for hours and hours and hours a day. So I took a different kind of employment, which was still good, but it didn't have like a super future. And then my wife and I had children, and as you know, that's a big financial refocuser.
Oh yeah.
And so, in many ways, it's out of that a lot of that refocusing on finance and the importance of it that gave rise to my third book, Financial Sorcery.
Mm-hmm. That was brilliant, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I liked it quite a bit.
But, eventually it just came to be that I kept doing this because as the economy got worse and worse, this became a better and more stable source of income than day jobs.
Right.
But even then, it was like kicking and screaming. I am a very financially safety-oriented person. So the idea of having a side income where you can basically make as much as you can put effort into, yet still also having this day job where you get a regular paycheck whether you have a good week or a bad week.
Right.
That was very appealing to have both. But
yeah.
I was sort of killing myself, and the kids needed more of my time, and eventually I was making much more as a writer / sorcerer than I was at my day job, and I was cutting hours at the day job, and finally it was just like, who am I kidding?
Right.
This should just be good. So, it was sort of much like I forget his name, but the founder of FUBU, the clothing line. He was waiting tables at Red Lobster like a year into people showing up at Red Lobster wearing his clothes.
Right, yeah.
Because even though he was making like major bank, way more than I probably ever will, he was still like that idea of I got to have a job. Was still there.
This can't last. There's no way this can last.
And you know what? I mean, honestly, even today, I will sit down and people, I could have like the best week ever. Say, at the beginning of a strategic sorcery course cycle when a lot of people join at the same time. It can be a wonderful week, and I'll do like major good work for people, and I could have this great week. But then, like, that Sunday comes, and no one, like, pings me for anything, like, on a Sunday. And I'm still like, it's over. It's all done. Nobody wants this crap anymore. I'm going to have to come up with something new.
I got to get a job.
There is that fear there. And so, in that respect, meditation and contemplation and the kind of changes to mind, body, and spirit that happen through things like sexual alchemy, refocus it. It's not that these things don't arise in the mind stream, but you don't have to be that thing anymore. You can recognize it and then go, okay, well, obviously that's silly. So, and then move on. Or you just, you rest in this mind state that is so cued into the ultimate, the flow of everything, that none of that, all that is so small, it doesn't even register.
Right. One of the things I like about the whole hermetic process that I go through is that it puts you in touch with your sort of more eternal aspect. On the Soma broadcast yesterday, I got a chance to talk about, or not yesterday, a couple days ago, about how each incarnation is sort of cumulative, and that's all stuff that I don't really know if it's true or not. It doesn't really matter to me so much, but just sort of plugging into that concept of the eternal is a really valuable way to put your current life situations into context a little bit, in my opinion. So, um, but do you buy into all the incarnation stuff? Because we've talked about this before, and I'm not exactly sure where you fall on the whole reincarnation spectrum.
I don't buy into anything 100%. You know, I probably the greatest lesson that I ever took away from Robert Anton Wilson's work was to never rate anything as true or false. Always see it on a sliding scale. So I've seen some evidence of reincarnation, and I've seen some evidence that one life affects the next life. It's not what I would call compelling evidence. I'm not going to go, you know, debate it with, a new atheist or something like that. But I've seen some evidence. I don't know if it's necessarily cumulative. I mean, any more than anything else is. In other words, I don't know if it's necessarily in an upward direction, because I mean, certainly you can fall as well. At least, you know, that's the idea of Buddhism. That, you know, you can kind of go up, go down. It's this cycle of life that you want to escape entirely. You know, I like to think that even if things are going around and around, that it's spirals, not circles, so that we are all cumulatively heading towards somewhere. And I've had some mystical experiences that indicate that that's true, and that is in fact a fundamental building block of reality. But you know, I don't get too worked up over it. I'm much more concerned with what goes on in this life, unless there is some major reason to be concerned about the last lives. And as far as, you know, what happens when we die and guiding our incarnation, you know, I've had a lot of teachings, especially from the Tibetan tradition, about guiding your soul to a different afterlife, to special pure lands or heavens. Even, you know, went on retreat to do the POA practice, where your skull opens up a little bit, so you know you completed the practice when you start bleeding out the top of your skull, because your whole soul is like hammering at the top of your skull to make the aperture. So you can bleed, or it will separate to the point where you put a little blade of kusha grass. So at the end of retreat, people are walking around with grass sticking out of their heads.
That doesn't sound very pleasant or appealing.
It's good, actually. It's good. Yeah, it doesn't hurt. It just happens spontaneously with some effort. But even then, I don't know if I'm going to do it, because I didn't mind the 10,000 years before I was incarnated as Jason, and I have some things that I think I remember from previous lives, but I'm not entirely 100% sure.
So what about the whole true will thing? Like each lifetime. All right, yeah. So so each lifetime is progressing towards an overarching theme. Do you buy into that, or?
No, not really. You know, for me, true will is not a thing. It's not a noun. It's a verb. One is acting out of one's true will when one is in harmony with one's nature of mind, one's true self.
It becomes as a thought and a word and a deed, right?
Yes. If one, you know, if one is acting from that place, then one is acting from one's true will. But the idea of, like, you know, I was sitting down and then I realized that my true will is to become the CEO of, you know, a small company. That's not really true will. Is to me a moment to moment thing. It's not
right.
these nouns that you can sort of tack onto it. So I think true will is available to anyone at any time, but that the incarnations don't necessarily map out onto this, you know, glorious head towards true will, or that we are, you know, that there's a particular theme to your incarnations other than becoming more who you are.
Makes sense.
And who knows? Maybe upon final enlightenment, we all look around as fully enlightened thelemic Buddhi or whatever, and you and I are sitting up on lotus flowers in the clouds, and it's boring as all fuck, and we're like, okay, well, you want to play the game again? Sure. And then we reincarnate as mice.
Yep.
You have to sort of force the ignorance upon yourself to enjoy existence.
Well, I really do believe in that everything that we do is about having a good time. I mean, basically, in my opinion, my cosmology is that when we were the all thing and everything was one and unified before it was split off, we were really bored, and we needed to separate for the opportunity to experience existence. I don't remember exactly how it's phrased in the Crowley thing, but I thought it summed it up pretty well. The whole separated for the sake of joy or whatever. I mean, I think that's pretty much it. We get bored, and so we incarnate and we have a good time. And I think that, in my opinion, the whole idea of the true will is basically what you said. It's what you want to do right now, and are you doing it, and what's stopping you, and how aware of what you really want
it's not what you want to do right now. It's not like, I feel like a snack. What do I have in the fridge? My true will says
I disagree though. I frankly, I think it really is about that, and I think that all the work that we're going through and the initiations through the spheres peel away the snack into what the snack represents, and then once we understand what the snack represents, we understand what it is I think that those momentary desires are a starting place, for an inquisitive mind, and I think that we have those being magicians, otherwise we wouldn't be into this whole thing,
Well, see, I mean, I don't know, I think as magicians we're not so different from anyone else.
Really?
As far as the whims and wants go. Yeah, I think people put a lot of elitism into being magicians that's not warranted. And then it all starts to smack of, people's...
Uh-oh. Ah, crap. Looks like we've lost Jason there. We'll see if I can track him down and... see if he still has time. We were about to wrap things up, I believe, because it was getting to be late anyway. So let me see if I can track him down and see if he still has time to finish this up. All right, thanks a lot. I'll be back. Now, okay. All right, welcome back. Sorry for that. I don't know what happened, but technical difficulties abound.
Well, this wonderful technology that we all rely upon, we complain when it doesn't work, but we have to sort of, as Louis C.K. said, we all have to keep in mind, like, this stuff is just going out into outer space and bouncing off satellites, and really it's quite amazing. So, down to our phones and computers and stuff. So, living in the future, you can't expect it to work all the time. But yeah, on true will, I think it's a deeper thing than that. I don't equate like the daily whims and wants that occur in the normal thought process as automatically being true will. Because then why even call it true?
Right. I understand what you're saying. I understand that the quote real true will is something higher and purer and more valuable and meaningful than just like, oh, I want some White Castle right now. I don't disagree with that. I just think that in my opinion, people have a tendency to ignore some of the more obvious pointers in our lives. I know I do. I'll sit there and I'll be like ignoring all these things that indicate to me that I'm getting unhealthy, and then next thing you know, I'm all unhealthy as a result of ignoring all these obvious signs. But if I would pay attention to what I want in the moment, maybe I'll go out and have some more vitamin C or whatever. But
now, see, there, I think you've tapped into something that people need to talk more about in magic, and I try to discuss this in my course. I have a lesson, in fact, it's about will and willpower. So I talk about true will, and then I talk about willpower, which is a very different thing. The idea of doing what you know you should do in the face of what you momentarily want to do.
right.
And you know this well. You lost 50 pounds?
Yeah, something like that.
So that had to involve a lot of mornings where you're like, really? Eggs and spinach and salsa again for breakfast? Like, really?
That's really delicious stuff, though.
It is delicious stuff. It's what I have for breakfast, too. But there's got to be mornings where you're like, I would love a bagel.
Oh, yeah.
Bagel with cream cheese. Mm-mm-mm.
Yeah,
But so that's the willpower. But it was funny because you reminded me of a conversation I had with a fellow a couple of years ago. I'm not going to out who they are because I just think that's foul unless they tell you, yes, give it. But we were discussing about Christianity and thelema and how so many people are sort of anti-Christian, but the term thelema ultimately in its spiritual usage comes from the Bible. Thy will be done, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. And that person was like, well, that's the will of God. Thelema is about the will of the self. And I was like, okay, so is it, but you've just talked about how Buddhism is in line with thelema. But in Buddhism, there's not really any self. Well, it's the enlightened nature of mind. It's not your individual egoistic self. It's this larger, more encompassing self. And I'm like, please describe how that is different from God.
Right.
And it was like suddenly it's like, oh, you're right. Like, that's how it all works.
Right. But in practice, like I know you hesitate to adopt any titles or recognition of any kind of attainment, but you're one of those people that I consider who are, you live your life as if you really were capable of doing all the things that you tell people we're capable of doing. You're one of the least bullshit people that I know. Your life reflects your philosophy, and your philosophy reflects your life. I think you're further along than you like to give yourself credit for, but we'll just chalk that up to your issues and move on. But I mean,
what would it serve anyone to claim a high title?
It's not about claiming titles. It's just about recognizing.
Then somebody would see me in my worst moment, and be like, "Wow, Mr. Adeptus Exemptus or Mr. Magister Templi just screamed his head off at his kids." Or,
well,
something, or Mr. Sissimus there just flipped the bird to somebody on the road.
But
so it's all.
That was in complete accord with his true will. That's fine,
I am a normal schlub just like anyone else. In the Chthonic Iranian order, we had reversed the triad. So you start off in the hermit triad, and then you become a lover, and then you finally rise to become a man of earth.
See, and I think that's totally hermetic, actually. If you look at, the Emerald Tablet, you ascend to the heavens so that you can return to the earth in power. That whole balanced approach is sort of what it's all about, Practical magic, doing things, taking your spiritual attainments or whatever, your spiritual perspective that you're able to achieve, and seeing through the dichotomy, and sort of realizing that you're free to do what you want or what you will, or what is most beneficial to you based on your desires in the long run. it's one of the things I always liked about your work is that you've taken some what I consider project management techniques and applied it to the great work, and you've taken your spiritual experiences and turned it into practical guidelines, because people, if you just sit on a mountaintop, you just all you end up with is a mountaintop up your butt. It doesn't necessarily help anyone or your family or help you meet your own responsibilities or help you have a good time. It's just sort of like, to what end? And I that was kind of what I hoped to touch on the most, was to what end? The spiritual things that we can get from your latest book, and the practical things that we've gotten from all of your works across the way, and how it kind of unfolds in your life in general today. I think that you kind of deserve a little bit of a reminder that you're rocking it hard right now. You aren't fucking up. You've got it going on in so many ways, and you're proving that the things that you have said over the years are not only true but also effective and meaningful. And anyway, I think that the community at large owes you at least a little bit of gratitude and a great deal of respect. So.
Well, thank you. I do. I greatly appreciate that, and I appreciate all my peers and students and teachers and people are not firmly in any camp. I learn so much from my students every day.
Yeah.
I have this apprentice program where I talk with people twice a month, and I'd say at least once every 2 or 3 calls, like they'll tell me about something, and I'm like, no, tell me about that. Like, do you know anything about this? And I'm like, no, but it's fascinating. Please, do tell. So, and then I'll help them put the strategic sorcery spin on it. But, yeah, I mean, we're all in this together, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm proud of what I've been able to accomplish. But one of the reasons that I try not to talk about my own life too much is that ultimately, if you are buying a book from me, or if you are joining my course or becoming an apprentice or something like that, you want to know what those teachings can do for you, because maybe I was just born with magic glitter powers up my ass.
Like
and I can teach whatever, and it doesn't really mean anything because I really have the special sauce. So that's why I put so much of an emphasis on field reports and things like that. When students do something, I'm like, look at what this student did, and my course was somewhat of a help in this. I never, of course, their own work is where the credit is deserved, but I like to put the focus on them, because really everybody, we're not all gifted the same. We don't all have the same capacity for the same things. That kind of egalitarian stuff is nice an idea, but it's just not the reality. Some of us are talented in some ways, and some of us are not. But most everyone can make something work, and I think my approach is really about how to make the magic that we already know work better for us.
And getting back to what Deb said about picking up techniques rather than a whole practice, what I liked best about your coursework was that it was a series of techniques that you've picked up, and you expose your students to a sequential set of practices that they can pick and choose from and merge with their own experience and traditions in their own way. It's not this is the one true occult, and
I mean, there is a system within it. If you just wanted to practice that, you could, and there are spirits specific to the course, and there are spiritual ideas like the facets of the flow that are specific to the course. But or to my methods, we'll say. But the course is designed specifically to be able to be picked up by people who are already practicing other things.
Right.
Because I don't know about you, but I don't know anybody anymore that's not practicing other things.
I don't have, yeah, and I don't have time to learn a whole new system. You know, I mean, this Hermetic thing has worked out great for me. I just, I'm good, you know. But when I see how you apply it, you know, I'm like, oh, that's a great technique. That article that Christopher Bradford wrote the other day about heating and cooling and sweetening and souring spirits, I was like, yeah, that sums up a lot of what I've done, but also reminds me of things that I've totally forgotten about, you know. And I'm like, oh, freaking brilliant, you know, and so simple. Of course, you just go out and taste your herbs. Duh, you know, stuff that we should know, you know. And it's just, I don't know. I think that I feel pretty fortunate to be in our particular circle of friends and magicians at this particular time. You know, Bradford does Palo, or is it, what does he do? Palo?
Yeah, he does Palo and
Palo and
Hermetics and
root
alchemy.
and root
I
work.
actually have to give him a big shout out. You know, my writing style is to do months of research and then write the book in the course of a few weeks.
Mm.
It drives my wife crazy. She says it's like, you know, it's like watching somebody cram a term paper in like the day before it's due. And you know, so I have, you know, I get an advance check and then I just have months of time to write a book, and I write like a little bit here, a little bit there, and then like a couple of weeks before it's due, I'm just up for, you know, 36 hours straight writing. And then but Christopher Bradford was extremely helpful with this because he knows the material that I was trying to go over, both in terms of the Eastern and Westerner. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I would shoot him over chapters, and he would read them, not to edit, but just to be like, you know, does this make sense? Like, you know, do I need to take a nap or can I keep going? Like, right. And really, like, within an hour, he would read a chapter and get back to me. So he was a really good friend when writing.
Yeah. Hey, I just wanted to mention to you the chapter on breathing techniques that you provide with the locks. And the different types of breaths within the locks. I've totally ripped and pillaged and put that into practice with my own daily asana and pranayama stuff that I have to do for stuff. And it's really changed the entire... it was a big game changer. The way you explained it, I think Harper tried to tell me before how to do it, and I just it didn't click. But for some reason, I was able to. I don't know why, but reading through that chapter has really been beneficial to me personally. So,
you know, that chapter, if there's anything that I want people to get out of the book, it's probably that inner heat chapter. Those chapters about breath and the inner heat, because so much in Western sex magic, you know, Randolph and Crowley and Craig and other people that have written about sexual alchemy have written about heating the elixir, but they write about the heating process basically as if, you know, you have to have sex for at least 30-40 minutes. But they don't really talk about any kind of inner heat pranayama or anything, and just like, you know, keep doinking it. And if you know, if you're following like Pascal Beverly Randolph, it's sort of like, make sure that you're not really passionate either. This should be like a dispassionate thing, which, you know, I mean, that's a boner killer right there. I'm sort of wondering, you know, was he just catering to Victorian morals of the day, in which case he wouldn't have been writing about this to begin with, or did he really think that to have clarity, you need to not have, you know, lust arising in the mind?
Maybe he switched back and forth.
Well, you know,
lustful, and then when he was able to.
Yeah, you know, I forget the exact quote. I think I quoted it in the book, but it was pretty much like, you know, don't think sexy thoughts while having sex. You know, God forbid. So, you know, that's not at all, that doesn't generate heat. That doesn't even generate good sex. You're going to have sex for like 30, 40 minutes with some girl. If it's not really great, she's, after 10 minutes, she's going to be like, okay,
Well, I,
done.
I look at that as sort of the use this one simple trick to last longer in bed, you know?
Well, I mean, these are, and there are things in the book that will get you to last longer so that you can have a simultaneous orgasm, with a woman or your partner or whoever that is. But that there's much more to the heating process than that. And if you look at Tantra and Taoism, you see these internal heat practices that are real. They get studied at universities. At Columbia, they have a monk raises core body temperature up to 117 degrees.
I believe it.
Using some of these techniques. And now, granted, this is a guy that practices 2 hours a day, but we don't need to do that. Just generating a little bit of the inner heat and then bringing that into the deification, holding divine pride of an invocation, or resting in the natural state of mind, and then opening up that moment of orgasm. It's like falling into enlightenment. It's wonderful.
Yeah,
I mean, never mind this battle with Qurans and across the abyss. Just have a good orgasm and float your way right up the path.
Works for me, man. All right, so
relax into Doth.
When you talk about the throat and the root locks and doing that at the same time, so every morning Harper found this app, right, for the phone, and it's this pranayama app, and it takes you through this just in and out, and then the 3-part where you hold it on the in and just relax and breathe in, and then the square breath, the 4-part breath, with Kambakta or whatever it's called. And so every morning for 15 minutes we go through those 3 things, and it's like 5 minutes, and then it's 5 minutes of each, basically. And it's just, I started using the locks that you described as I was doing that, and I started having these for these like quote unquote advanced levels of pranayama, right? He's like, your body will lock and you will assume a rigid thing and you'll be covered in a sheen of sweat. And I'm like, yeah, you're covered in a sheen of sweat because you're working out the whole time,
Yeah.
But it was carrying on into the coitus and the falling back into orgasm. After having done that for a few weeks, it's definitely changed things. It's been very, very. Just saying, I appreciate a good practice. The rewards are wonderful. So
I'm reaching into the bedrooms of occult America.
Ew.
That's great.
All right. Well, hey, it's going on 3 o'clock your time. So,
Yeah.
Shall we wrap things up?
Absolutely.
Alrighty then. Well, thank you very much for coming. I'm going to try to do a little bit of editing on these videos and get the pieces put together into one, and
that would be great.
put the 353 thing in front and back because I know you love that. And anyway, thanks a lot for.
As long as you're not shouting "will" or something before.
Oh yeah, I can't even remember that.
Yeah.
I feel like such a lapsed Catholic every time somebody does will. I'm like, oh.
Do what thou wilt to be told in the law. What is your will?
I'm hungry. Shut up.
Have sex and attain enlightenment. To what end?
Well, yeah.
Do I really need another end?
Not my end, anyway.
There you go.
Well, okay. Well, thanks again. Continue to be blessed and highly favored amongst all of your peers and friends, and may everything you do be incredibly successful as it has been so far. And thanks.
Well, I'm so happy to see the ROpocalypse taking shape.
Me too. I'm not sure where it's going to go, but we'll have a good time getting there. So.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks a lot.